Okay, live. We are now live. Okay, we are now live. Wow. Welcome, Dannielle. I'm going to call you Danny because that's what I know you better as. DD Line, Dannielle, Dannielle, double N's, double L, D Line. So I'm going to call you Danny.
That's okay. You can call me Danny.
Anyway, welcome.
Thank you. Oh, I put the glass up again. Cheers.
What are you having there? What have you got going there?
I have a Verdelho from the Peel Wine Estate, which is about 10 minutes drive from Peel House, where MMH Press will be having their special soiree next week.
Oh, yes, next week, of course. Yes, of course. Yeah, for the 3 days. Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome. Well, as I said in the thing there, Danny writes romance, paranormal. But before we get into that, you're a Queenslander.
I am.
So living here in Perth, but we're quite forgiving over here. Okay. So, but coming up there, I was in the edge of a conversation. You were talking to some people, and there was something about sharks. I caught the end of it, the story. You were swimming with sharks or something, and I thought, what was that all about?
I've swamped with a few strange animals, none of them intentionally, but back in the 90s, in my younger years, I was working on a place called South Mole Island. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah.
That's off the beautiful place. But there was a pontoon off the jetty, and a group of us on our day off decided we would swim out to this pontoon and get a bit of a suntan and then swim back later, which we did. And as we were swimming back in, probably just about to step onto the shore, there was a fisherman on the pier, and he pulled in a 7-foot tiger shark from where we were swimming.
Right, yeah.
So that was my adventure with swimming with sharks, and I don't want to do it again.
Okay, so what were you doing on South Mole?
I was working there, working my way around Queensland, actually, for a bit of an adventure. And I was cleaning, so doing cleaning job, and then at night I was doing babysitting, so all the parents could go out and enjoy themselves, and I was looking after their kids.
Oh, wow, sounds really wonderful. So tell us a bit about yourself, though. So how did you actually get into writing? I mean, did you always want to be a writer, or did you have an epiphany, or what? What actually happened?
I told myself that I would write a book someday, but I don't know if I ever decided when someday was going to be. But I was a reader first. So I've always loved reading books. The first book I fell in love with was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.L. Lewis. So that still stays with me. That is still my favourite book of all time, even though it's a children's book.
Yeah.
And then Trixie Belden, I don't know if you know Trixie Belden. She was when I was a teenager, she was a teenage girl solving mysteries. So I moved from childhood adventures and magic to mystery. And then I discovered Stephen King, Dean Koontz and James Herbert. So that's when I got into all the horror. So I was still very much a reader then. Then I got to my senior year of English, and we had an American teacher come over to take senior English class. Yeah. And I had the biggest crush on him, so I started writing stories to impress him. So that's when I started my writing.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. So what did you write? What did you write back then? Do you recall the first story you wrote?
I still have the first story that I wrote for him that he marked for me. Isn't that sad? But I wrote a mystery story about the secret of the lake, and there was a monster inside the lake. And he loved it and gave me great marks. And so as much as I had a crush on him, it was good getting the extra credit for English too.
But how did you make the jump from reading Stephen King to romance? That's like two very different genres. Why didn't you write horror?
There's a little bit of a jump. I think there's a bit of, maybe romance isn't the right word, but relationships. There's stories about relationships in most books and even Stephen King's. So even though they didn't go into details of romance, the relationships were there, and I love those. I love how Stephen King makes the ordinary, everyday things extraordinary. So that's one of the things I was fascinated with. I come from a family that believe in the ghosts and all that sort of thing. So there was always that imagination there, and I probably always had an overactive imagination too. And I love stories about mythology, which are based in the magic and all that sort of thing. So it just sort of stemmed from there. And then, well, why not combine everything? I would say I was a horror writer first when I started writing, but my characters kept wanting to do that kissing stuff. So I had to decide the realization that I was a romance writer.
Okay, because I was just thinking, we said Stephen King, one of his books I like best of all was, you talk about characters, is that book Misery, about the relationship, and who was it? Kathy Bates plays the part of the crazy lady, and the dynamic between just those two characters. That's all. Yeah. That's all that really were in the movie.
All it was. That was so good.
And there was just character, and all of a sudden she chops off his foot.
Spoilers.
What? What? Okay. What? There wasn't a lot of kissing going on in that, if I recall. There wasn't.
No, but she was his number one fan.
Yeah. Anyway, so I watched the movie. I thought, oh, Kathy Bates did a good job of it. Anyway,
yes.
So, but it's still quite a leap. But when you were a kid and you liked all of these, like, did you read all of the myths, like the Greek ones and the Roman ones and the Norse ones and all of those?
All of them. I loved them all.
Did you? I also gobbled all of those up. That was up. So what was your first romance novel called? Your first published?
Oh, it was a short story, because I started out with short stories. I'll have to go.
Have you got it there?
I've got anthologies that I've got stories in. Probably, that's a good question. It's been so long, I can't think what the first romance story was that I wrote. They are pretty much, all my short stories are mostly spooky ones too. So I will cheat and say the first published story, I don't know if you can see that, was
okay. What's it? Getting a bit of glare back. What's it called?
A Nose for Trouble. It's a romance.
A Nose for Trouble. Okay.
So that was my first published romance, and that was in 2019. That was from an anthology call out from Gumnut Press, and it was supposed to be a short story. And I just kept writing, and I didn't make it into the anthology, but I was lucky enough that Gumnut Press offered me a 3-book contract. So A Nose for Trouble was soon joined by An Ear to the Ground. I'm going back to front. Sorry, everyone.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
And then in February, my 3rd book came out, which is A Twist in the Tale.
Okay. How long are those books? How many words are those books? These.
The first book was probably more of a novella, so it's about 25,000 words. The next book went up to 45,000 words, and the 3rd book was 56,000 words.
But the folks you write for, what's your audience?
My audience?
Your readership?
For romantic suspense and for paranormal, which is what I'm writing now.
Okay, so tell us a bit now about the paranormal.
Oh, I've always been interested. I think it's fascinating that people can see ghosts, and there's still things yet that science can't explain, and it fires the imagination and the possibilities that can be. I mean, where do these stories come from that vampires and werewolves could possibly exist? There's still so much history and mythology and science for what people didn't know back then that is still mixed and fascinating to cultures today.
Okay, so have you got one of those books there with you?
Not yet. That's what I'm writing.
Oh, that's the one you're working on now. But do you combine romance with that as well, or are these like separate things?
This will be a paranormal romance that I'm working on now.
So what do we have? Vampires kissing, or what do we do? I don't.
No, there's plenty of vampire books out there that I don't think I could do justice to. So I love writing about curses and breaking curses. So that's what my story is.
Okay, so we just give me a hint. So these curses. Well, sorry, allow me to rephrase the question. I can only write from true events. And I'm pretty basic, because you edit my books, right? So as you know, I only can write from true. I'm pretty basic in that regard. I can't imagine how you dream up a paranormal world and then populate it with people. I can't do that. How do you do that?
Oh, you're all the tough questions, isn't it? I can't tell you that I just do. They're just in my head.
Really?
They're fascinations from childhood and questions that were never answered. I try and make them up in my stories. And they're still at the heart of it. It's always a relationship, whether it's cursed characters or supernatural characters.
But can you, without giving away any of your stories, can you give us an example of one that you've done like that, or where you have a character involved in the paranormal? How do you do that?
One of my stories involves a Romney traveller who conjured a spirit 300 years ago and is still trying to break the curse that compels him to do what the curse tells him to do. That came out awfully, I'm so sorry. But it's about the relationships and trusting in another person to help them break a curse.
So a lot of them sort of has to do, as you say, with character again.
Yes.
So, well, we're sort of going to get a bit into your writing process now a bit. So what drives your stories? Is it the plot that you have, or the characters? What drives it forward?
It's also the characters for me, and problem solving, and the plot is probably what enhances the story along. But I like character-driven stories. So
you have it like a character, a paranormal character, or somebody who can summon up paranormal things. I'm giving you a scenario now, right? So paranormal, somebody who can feel the paranormal, right?
Yes.
Okay, he's walking down the road.
Okay,
do paranormal stuff. So he's walking down. Let me give you something. He's walking down the middle of Perth, St George's Terrace. He's walking down there.
Oh, and well, there'd be a lot of history, wouldn't there? Who knows what could have happened 200 years ago when somebody else was walking down that street and left their energy behind for somebody who is sensitive per se, like a medium, fortune tellers and things like that could pick up those vibrations of what happened all that time ago and make a story from that.
Well, that's very good. So that's kind of what you do. So you start with a character in a place. There's action. He's moving forward, or sorry, I'm saying he. Are your characters mostly male or female? Your protagonists?
Both. I write for whoever's talking the loudest in my ear. Yes, I hear voices. You're not supposed to say that, are you?
No, I love people. I was reading the other day, my wife's a medical doctor. She has crazy patients. They say they hear voices in their head. I go, really?
I must be one of those.
Yeah, I go, yeah, I am. Oops. Do you hear voices? No.
Not at all.
Not at all. So, all right. So that's all. So, but where does this come from? Do you get involved in any or know people who have these abilities to sense things?
I do.
You do?
Yeah, I do know some people like that.
Well, what locally?
Yes.
There is a lady here. I know we can talk here. There's a lady here locally in Perth. Okay, and my wife encouraged me to go along to one of her things, and she says that she can sense things. Okay, or she can conjure. Not like talk to dead people's wrong, but she can single out people in the audience and say, your husband, blah 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 blah, and the people who are there, say she's pretty accurate at doing that. I forget what her name is. You've met me. She's taller than me, and she's a big woman.
Okay.
I don't know what her name is, but she from what I watched, she seemed to be on the money. What she was doing. But similar people here in Perth.
Yeah, it's one of those things you've got to be careful with, because some people can read faces and actions very well, and they get things right a lot of the time. But then some people just come out of the blue with things, and you're sort of like, how would you possibly know that? And one of my theories, because it's still science that hasn't been discovered yet, is with all the evolution and inherent knowing from back in the caveman days of things that we still do to protect ourselves, and awarenesses of things going on around us, and that maybe that is something to do with it, or repeated patterns where they seem out of the blue. I don't know, it's very deep.
I'm not sure whether it's deep or not, actually, and I think it's very interesting to bring it through into the writing. Is that the sense of things, because a character is not just a body that's got certain things and intellectual abilities and certain physical attributes. There has to be a soul is a word that's overused a bit, I guess, in these contexts, but you need something more.
Yeah, you've got to put life into your characters.
To bring it to the fore. Yeah, that's interesting in how you do it with the paranormal. Their sense of having something else that they're aware of. Is that kind of what you're doing? Is it?
Yeah. Well, again, it's probably just my overreactive mind. But yeah, there's things there that we don't know yet, and some of it could be a bit of waffle, but I don't know that all of it is.
Okay.
I like to get an idea of it.
So what's your real writing regime? Okay. Can you write any time of the day, or do you have a fixed schedule that you got to work to? How does it work for you as a writer?
Okay. I think you've got to work out what works best for you, because there's a lot of things going around. People say that you have to write every day to get in the moment, and you don't. You've got to work out what's for you. If you write better at night, and that's when you write. If you write better in the morning, you write in the morning. If you've got half an hour in the car while you're waiting to pick up the kids from school, take your notebook or your laptop or whatever and write then. You've got to grab the moments when you can. So I can write any time, but I'll probably write better in the morning.
I know you've got one child at uni and one child still in high school.
That's right.
So how do you fit that in? So in the morning, I guess it must be pretty chaotic, getting them all out the door and.
Yeah, get it all slam in, right, shut in into the office, off I go.
Yeah.
And then hope that I remember to pick them up at the right time.
Okay, so do you pretty well write? You try and write in the morning.
Yes, but I've just said that you don't have to write every day to be a valid writer if that's not your thing. But I do write something every day, even though it's not necessarily on whatever book. I write notes and chat away online. I'm part of a few writing groups, so I'm always chatting to somebody on the writing group and on Facebook, and family back home in Queensland, so I'm chatting or writing stories to them, and so I am always writing something. It's just not necessarily always on my book.
So do you like scribble down things on Post-its and stick them on the wall for later reference, or electronic Post-its?
Tuesday, so I've got stacks of notebooks I take all my notes and tell myself stories and remind myself that this character's done such and such on page 76, so I've got to make sure that he's done the same thing on page 177, which is pretty much the same.
I know. I'm guilty of that because I think it was you in editing one of my books. You said, "Wasn't this person a blonde?"
That's right.
Yeah, I remember that. And I went, "What?" Oh, yeah. But there is a bit of a mantra about if you don't write 2,000 words a day, when you wake up in the morning before you have your coffee, you're going to be a failure as a writer. There is a bit of a mantra like that running around the place. I think, there's other
If that
stuff
works for
going
you,
on.
do it. I don't think there is any rule. Once you find what works for you, that's what you do. It might not work for anybody else, but that's how they learn to find their own thing and work out what works for them.
I agree, and I think the problem is that, and I do understand about having a regime of writing, and that's a good thing, but it's kind of good to break the mold occasionally, to break out. I mean, I went for a walk down the beach here yesterday, and there was a guy, because I was with the dog, the little Staffy, and he wanted to know what it was. She's actually she's what they call a blue. It's a funny color. So he wanted to know what she was and how old she was, blah blah blah. And he had a Staffy, and anyway, and he's lived in this area on the beach, and he says he surfed here all his life. He said, "You look like a surfer." Well, I used to be anyway, back in the day. But like in 5 minutes, he told me his life story, and he's been to Bali 200 times.
Oh, wow.
What? And his mum and dad live down the road here in Arcadia Drive, opposite Pengo's. What? And he's got a kid and that. And so I come back here and I write that down. You do that. I write it down. And I think it's kind of arbitrary. And I describe him. And then I think, put it to one side. And sometimes, do you do that? And like,
I get that. People come and start telling me their life stories. I don't know why. I must have one of those faces.
But do you scribble them down, and make notes?
Yeah, I'll make notes later, because sometimes I'll say a really interesting line. I'm like, oh, that's really good. I'll have to note that down.
Yeah. And then, but do you use it later in some form in your stories?
Some I have, not all of them. Listen, I've got a lot of notebooks here full of scribble.
Well, I think all I think that sort of shows you're a writer if you do that. Do you write poems at all?
I used to when I was a teenager. I've got a book full of angsty poems from my teenage years and unrequited love, but I wouldn't say I was a poet. I think that's a marvelous talent that I don't have, but I could write words.
Okay, but do you say you're more of a short story novel writer, would you say?
I started with short stories, but sorry.
No, carry on.
No, I started writing short stories. That was the first thing, but with this series with the Nose for Trouble from Trinket Bay series, the next book got bigger, and then the book after that got bigger. So once you've got your world and your world building sorted out, it's quite enjoyable how easy it is to just expand on the stories and add the new characters and bring the older characters in. And I really like that. That's sort of something I also like about Stephen King's writing, how he's got characters from other books from earlier books that suddenly appear in his more recent books. And I don't know if anybody really realised that at first, that was something that he did.
Yeah, no, he did. He's also, what did he do? He wrote the thing about often, and one of the writers' things, as we were discussing earlier, you can start writing and you add more characters and more characters and more characters. Yes, like this, it's very difficult to keep it all together. There's now too many characters.
Yeah, you've got to be careful of that. I have a a notebook, or online I keep lists of the characters, what they look like, what book they are in, what their reactions are to certain things, their personalities. So, yeah, so like a Bible of all the stories.
So what do you do? Do you write notes, or is it like a mind map going out with all of the...
Both. I've got notes, and then I'll write notes to myself in them. Don't forget this, and this is going to happen, and come back to page something else because you haven't fixed this.
Okay. No, I must say it's. But what do you think of the concept of writer's block? Do you suffer from it?
No, I've got too many stories to write. There's too many ideas floating around in my head. But I think that sometimes it's your brain's way of telling you need to take a break and go for a walk around the block, or go have a coffee, or sort of recharge your energy and come back and sit back down. You can read out the story in a different font, because sometimes you need to trick your eye, and then that'll get you back into your story.
Okay.
Reading aloud.
You change the font, don't you, Danny?
Yeah, because your eye gets used to a certain font, and then you trick it. It's another editing trick too. When somebody's self-editing, you change the font, and then you'll read out words that you didn't see were there before, or words that you missed because you think you've written them.
Okay. Do you use any editing things? You know, I do. I use like that Grammarly thing to like pick up on all my errors.
Yeah, I like Pro Writing Aid because I like to go make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no, I do the same. I think that's helpful before I give it to you. Since I just see too many schoolboy errors in there. But yeah, so with your characters, okay, I know I keep coming back to character because that's what you do. Okay, do you always I'm coming back to something you said earlier. Do you always invent them, or they're like a conglomeration of people you may have seen, or it's a
probably
somebody...
some that are invented, some characteristics. I'm not much of a talker. I want to sit back and I watch everything going on around me. So I'm people watching and watching how they tilt their head, or follow somebody else around the room. So those little characteristics and quirks start coming into my stories. I don't think I've consciously picked anybody out to make a characteristic of, but I do notice what's going on around me, and I use that.
All right. So what part of the writing process don't you like?
Don't like.
I mean, we've discussed writer's block, so that's not an issue to you, which is a good thing. Oh, sorry. Before I come back to this question, I want to ask you another one. Which I want to ask you. When did you actually seriously sit down and start writing?
Probably 2-3 months of a story floating around in my head. So
sorry. How old were you?
Oh, how old? High school, 13, 14.
But you were writing short stories when you sat down to write like a novel.
No, well, probably no, 17, because that's when I was trying to impress my English teacher. So I started writing
like
stories.
A proper novel, like 20,000 words.
Would have been about 10 years ago when I started getting interested in writing again, because I had real life got in the way for a while. And so I was busy working and having a family, so I wasn't writing as such. But then, there was a personal incident that happened and I needed to hide in stories for a while, so I got back into writing then.
Okay, so did you find that helpful?
Yes, very much so. It's very therapeutic to be writing things and then getting it out of your head and out of your heart. That's probably the best way to put it.
Okay. There's an American writer. What's his name? Charles Bukowski. I think it's correct. I don't know if you've heard of him. but he was like, I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No, I haven't.
He was a drunk and a drug taker, and he wrote from the gutter, as they said. Okay, and he never suffered from writer's block, but he also started relatively late. And I've read about other writers like that, and where they said they had a life, they had something to write about. So when I've read about these people who got writer's block, they're like some 20-year-old who actually went to university, thought they'd be a writer. They do all the courses, but they never actually experienced anything.
Mm.
So
It's got to be a mix, doesn't it? Some 20-year-olds have experienced a lot in their time, so it's
true.
You can't put an age limit on writing. You can pick writing up at any time. I think you don't have to be. It's one of those things that you don't have to be a certain age, and you don't have to retire from it because you're a certain age. It's always there.
So what would your advice be to an aspiring writer of any age?
Oh goodness, so many things. Don't feel that you have to write every day.
Okay.
Work out what works for you and find what I call you. Well, I think it was a buzzword you call your tribe. Find people who will support you, tell you the truth, but tell you in a kind and helpful way. Encourage you, join writing groups, and mix with people who get you and don't look at you too strangely when you say you hear voices. Things like that. It's a very lonely pursuit, writing, and anybody you can reach out and chat to and say, hey, I'm stuck on this idea, what do you think of blah blah blah, and they can give you feedback. That sort of thing's gold. And you're always learning. It's
And what do you think of the other maxim? In order to write a lot, you must read a lot. Do you still read a lot?
I probably don't read as much as I did as my teens, but I've got a job that requires me to read books, so I'm kind of winning there. I still get to read all sorts of things.
But do you still read? Did you read in the genre that you write in, or do you just like all sorts of things?
Oh, I read all sorts of things.
But you find
Paranormal romance is my favourite, but yeah, I read all sorts of things.
Okay.
Well, that's another way.
Pardon?
We can talk at the same time. That's another way to learn. If you read all different things and you work out what you like and it transfers to your writing, and you see a writer's style, and if that speaks to you, that's something that you can learn from. And the same token, if there's stories that you don't gel with, then that's telling you how not to write, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, no, I understand. I understand what you say. In your writings, when you got to balance a few things, we mentioned character, and you got plot, and you got some of the unique characteristics of your characters. Okay, and then let's say two people walk into a room. Okay, how much effort do you put into, and how do you work out where to cut off in describing how they're dressed and what the room looks like?
I think it depends on the genre, because some genres like more detail than others, but you've got to leave enough there for the reader to imagine the scenery and to imagine what the characters look like. You can't tell them too much. Put enough to build the picture, but let them decide what the picture should look like.
But how do you get that balance? I think this is a bit of advice for young writers. It's that, how do you get that balance? So just start off with let's say a woman walks into a room, into a bar. Let's say she walks into a bar and she's going to get a drink. And it's 6 o'clock at night.
I would be probably imagining all these different scenarios.
Okay, so what would she be wearing? Because I mean, it's very difficult because you got to you don't want to make it look like a clothing catalog.
Yeah, the laundry list. Yes, you don't do the laundry list.
Yeah, exactly. So, how do you, in your mind, or do you just say you got to have a feel for it?
You use your senses. So you just describe what you see, what you feel, whether the bar's a smoky bar, kind of atmosphere, whether it's dark, what kind of music's playing, what can you hear, what can you touch? Like the table's all sticky and dirty. Has it just been wiped down by the bar attendant? Is there like hot chips cooking in the background? Again, the smell of smoke, although they're not allowed to smoke in bars anymore, so that's probably not quite the right thing to say. But that also think that's how you build your picture.
So you invoke. So Danny, you invoke all the five senses when you walk into a.
I try. I'm still very much a learner writer myself.
But that's sort of the paradigm you try to work to invoke all the senses, because you did just that when you were explaining it. So
that's what I'm working towards. I hope that it's happening.
Well, I think it's a never-ending journey, isn't it? So for all the writers. So what's your next book? What are you working on now?
I'm working on a 4-book series. So it's paranormal romance, as I was saying. It's set in an American university, but it's a magical university. It's told we're talking about keeping your characters to a minimum, but this is actually a multi-character viewpoint story.
I say you're going to have different points of view.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, I'm stupid.
Crazy. That's hard work, huh?
Yes, I'm setting myself up some big work. But I want to, after that 4 books, there will be characters in those 4 books that are going to appear in the next series, which is a 5-book series, and they're going to cross over. So it'd be like a university crowd, and then 15 years later. So
have you got planned out, scribbled on the wall list somewhere in front of you,
9
a 4-book series followed by a 5-book series?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, man.
How long is this going to take?
I've got the draft for the first 4 books, so I'm
really?
going through editing now. So.
And each of these books, how many words are they?
Too many. They're going to be about 90,000.
Each book?
Yes.
That's hectic, right? So you got 90,000 words. Okay.
That'll keep me out of mischief for a while. I'm hoping to have the first book out early in the next year, or maybe even the end of this year if everything works out well.
But sorry, how do you do that? Do you work out to complete all 4 before you start publishing, or do you just do 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4? What do you do?
I want to write all 4. I want to finish all 4 books before I release them, so that I know that I'm not missing any details. Hopefully I don't miss any details, because the story starts at 1 and finishes at 4. So once know that I've got them right, and then I'll release them. That's the plan anyway.
So you're going to wind up with like 360,000 words, roughly 400,000 words. So you're going to be right up there with, what's the name, Diana? Do I pronounce it correctly? Garabaldon, the lady who wrote The Highlander.
The Highlander. I don't know. Or do you?
Remember they made it into a Netflix series, I think. Like 300,000 words.
I know the one you mean. I don't want to be a 1 book with 300,000 words, though.
Okay.
Oh, no, wow. I can't remember the name of it. I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of the name of it. Diana Gamblin? Something like that.
I think it's funny. I think she's Argentine. She's American, but I think it's Gabaldon or something.
Yeah, the Outlander.
Yeah, she wrote The Outlander. That was it. Sorry, not the Outlander.
No, you're right.
Yeah. So wow. So Danny, how far down the track you say you are with this? You've written all the words.
I've drafted the 4, but now I've got to fix them and re-edit them and make sure I haven't stuffed up, and then I'll send them to my editor.
Okay, all right. Oh, okay. Okay, well, wow, that's like, we should have started talking about this a lot earlier. But how do you plot all this out? Do you like write it on the board, or do you just like? And how do you know when one book finishes and the next starts?
It's like I wrote it into one big book and then I've split into 4 parts.
Okay.
So that's how I went. But I am not a plotter as such. I'm learning to be. So I do write notes for myself for each section, and the storylines that start in book 1 and they're tied up in book 4, sort of thing.
So you're what they call a pantser. You write by the seat of your pants.
I'm half and half. I've got to have a guideline. I can't just sit there and write. But if I don't watch myself, I'm very good at waffling off. Waffling off into a corner. And having to rein myself back in. So I'm a bit of everything, probably.
Well, I think you have to be. I don't think you can be in one camp or the other. I can't see how you can do. I've heard of these people who just sit down and can write a book for 100,000 words. I think, well, I don't know how you keep them in your head. Unless you just got 2 characters.
I wish I was a plotter. I think it'd be easier.
So how many characters have you got trundling through these 360,000 words?
There's a lot. There's background characters. There's probably 6 main characters.
And do you use backstory in it, or is it just forward momentum the whole time?
I'm hoping that there's a sprinkling of backstory throughout the books.
Okay. Well, that's enough enticement to get the people to start wanting to get a look at a sprinkling.
Yes.
A sprinkling. Okay, I'll bear that in mind. Wow, you surprised me. I didn't realize that you had that on the go. So what's your plan then with the other 5, and why 4 and then 5? I mean, why not 4 and then 4?
That's the way the story's worked out. I've got something in mind for the 5 books, which the 5th book will be the overlying arc for the other 4.
Wow. Okay. So when did you dream all this up?
Stories floating around in my head all the time that I'm going to write one day, kind of thing. And then I keep notes, and then I work on something else, and then I come back to it, and then I get to a point where I was like, I've got to do it. Get in the chair and write.
So have you been working like burning the midnight oil to get all this out? Have you?
It probably feels like it some days.
Is it? So how long have you been working on these 4 books?
Good question. Probably a year.
That's astonishing. That's a heavy workload, Danny. Huh?
A rough draft's not the same as all the building. It's just the bare bones of it.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we just about run out of time here, but that's been fascinating talking to you. No, the amount of work you've done is astonishing. You know?
And here I was thinking I was going to be boring.
Definitely not. Definitely not. We started off with sharks. So what do? I swim with sharks, and I churn out 360,000 words in a year. There you go. Huh? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being available for an interview.
Thank you for asking me along, and good luck with your award nomination for MMH Press.
Yes, and for you as well. So anyway, thank you, and I'll probably see you during next week. Cheers, Danny.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Let me stop this now.